Our breaking news coverage as the D.C. franchise in the NFL will go by the Washington football team. And this is the logo that they released today. Of course, they were established in 1932 in Boston and then came to Washington. They have new uniform concepts as well. Now, the colors remain the same. Pretty much everything remains the same, but there won't be any kind of logo on the jerseys. The players seem to like him, though. Jonathan Allen with a new mocked-up helmet and uniform says Washington there, and the helmets have the number on the side of them. Ryan Kerrigan using those flame emojis. He likes it as well, as does Daron Payne with that number on the helmet. So that's really the only change is to the helmet, and that logo that we have been so used to over the last several generations has been retired as well. I want to bring in NFL insider Jonathan Jones. We had John Breach on moments ago, and I guess his question was why didn't Washington do this 13 days ago or whenever it was that they decided to retire that nickname?
Yeah, it's a great question, and obviously they were running into some trademark issues. I think that they obviously recognized that there was really no need to rush this. Certainly from a merchandising and branding standpoint, there's no reason whatsoever to have to figure this out by Labor Day, which is essentially the time that they would need before announcers were calling games on the field. Speaking of that, my thoughts to all the announcers calling Washington games this season, right? Remember the San Diego Chargers. But no, it's what the team obviously, they want to get this right. And Dan Snyder, I know it's a little bit of a joke that he wants to finally get something right, but I think he understands the jokes around him and around this franchise over the years. This is why he hired Ron Rivera as head coach, just as one example, to try to correct course. And now, of course, with the Washington Post article a week or two ago, maybe forcing him to correct course more than he wanted to. Obviously, FedEx and the pressure from sponsors, as well as Nike, to change the name, something that he said in all caps he would never do. So obviously, this is a new era for the Washington football team. Personally, I'm very happy that they have retired the name. And, you know, moving forward, I know that they are going to involve many focus groups. I know that they have already retained a firm that's looking at any number of different names. And then, of course, they're going to take input from fans, former and current players alike.
Yeah, they also said, according to that ESPN report, that they're getting input from sponsors as well. I found that interesting.
Yeah, it's a nice thing to say, to let everybody understand that they all have a voice, that every voice counts, that every vote counts. I'm not entirely sure that FedEx or Nike is ultimately going to have any real say in this. Certainly, you know, there can be fan polls, all that they want. They're going to take a lot of focus groups, a lot of anonymous surveys. They're going to spend, you know, probably 8 months doing this. Of course, you want to be in a position when you announce this to have all of your branding and merchandising out there. Certainly you want it to coincide with the start of the NFL draft, and potentially earlier than that, maybe even free agency. If Washington is to land a major free agent come March, that you want to be able to have those jerseys at the ready. We saw, obviously, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wanting to have those Tom Brady jerseys out, but they were doing a rebrand, and so that didn't really time up with when he signed with Tampa. Washington would hope, just from a dollars and cents perspective, to have everything in place when you can really cash in. So I would anticipate that obviously nothing is going to happen during the season, and that they would like to have something in place by March or April so that they can roll out all of their branding and merchandise to make as much money as possible.
If they come out and say they're going to call themselves the Washington Swooshes, I think we know that sponsors had a little something to do with that. How about the fact that this today really brings down the curtain on that logo? You know, when they came out a couple of weeks ago and said that they'd be retiring the Redskins nickname, the logo was still there because we didn't really, we didn't have anything else to use. I mean, what do you use as a logo? Today they come out with a new logo that just says Washington. How important is that to try to move on from the logo as well?
It's very important. If you're going to move on from the team name, you certainly should move on from the logo and vice versa. And so it's a little odd that they didn't do it a couple of days ago or, a dozen days ago. But here we are today. And frankly, we're talking about it. It's breaking news, but I think that they did a smart thing where there's a lot of other eyes across the NFL and a number of other things. This is a smart PR play where they did not enjoy being the focus of the entire NFL's attention during the quote-unquote dead period. Now guys are reporting back to training camp. There's a lot of talk about obviously COVID testing and opt-out clauses and salary cap negotiations, et cetera, et cetera. So this will obviously take its place in the NFL news cycle for now, and then obviously everyone else can turn their attention to whatever other breaking news we have maybe in 2 hours across the NFL. So a wise move there, no doubt. And it is, again, it's going to be very odd to just call them Washington. From a writing perspective, Washington football team. But that's the way it's going to be. And again, no rush whatsoever to find a name. I will say this. I heard Warriors passed around a lot, the Washington Warriors. I'm not entirely sure the NFL wants to have a team name that is also in the NBA. And so I would not place my money on the Washington Warriors. Again, there's going to be a lot of surveys, a lot of polling, a lot of sponsorship and fan and current and former player engagement and involvement that is going to take several months before the Washington football team comes up with a new nickname.
All right, that's our NFL insider, Jonathan Jones, as we learned today that Washington will now be known as the Washington football team throughout the 2020 season, releasing mock-ups of the new uniforms. Really the only change is to the helmet. No logo up there, just a number. Some notable upcoming dates: September the 5th, teams cutting rosters down, and September the 10th, regular season, week 1.
All right, that does it for this hour of CBS Sports HQ. Amanda Guerra, Chris Hassel with you with the logo behind us. That is big.
It is. It fills the entire screen. That's the one and only logo that the Washington football team has. We'll talk more about that in the coming hours here on CBS Sports HQ. That's Amanda Guerra. I'm Chris Hassel. Don't go anywhere. All right, we got some nickname news and logo news all over the world of sports at this hour. The Washington football team, that's it, that's the name, at least the temporary name, as the D.C. franchise explores a rebrand. According to ESPN, the team is going to continue the process of retiring the Redskins name and that logo. The team logo on the helmet will be replaced by a gold number, but the colors and pretty much the entire uniform remains the same outside of that. We're going to talk more about that in just a moment. Now, in other nickname news, the franchise in the NHL in Seattle is going to be known as the Kraken. That's the new logo. Those are the colors. It looks pretty cool. It's
very cool.
It's going viral on social media. The franchise will be the 32nd in the NHL and will begin play next season in what used to be known as Key Arena, where the Seattle Supersonics used to play. But pretty cool stuff. And here's more from Pete Blackburn.
Ultimately, I was rooting for the Seattle Sockeye as the expansion team name for the Seattle's new NHL team. But I do like the Kraken. I think it's fine. But at the end of the day, it's more about the logo. It's more about the branding, the jersey, the culture. And I think that Seattle's team has really knocked it out of the park here. The jersey's super nice. The logo's okay. But at the end of the day, I think that, it's net positive here for the start.
That was Pete Blackburn. Elsewhere in baseball, we get going tonight. The Yankees visiting the Nationals in the first game. The Dodgers and Giants in the nightcap. Nationals ace and opening night starter Max Scherzer is ready to go.
For me, I know this one, I actually feel really good physically. Coming into this, even though we only had 4 spring training starts, I feel like I put myself in a position to be absolutely ready for opening day with all the things considering. So the fact that I haven't faced the Yankees that much over the past 5 years, they haven't faced me. So, we're just playing the chess game right now.
First of 60 games for these 4 teams tonight. The Nationals, despite having Scherzer on the mound, being the defending champs, are the underdogs against the Yankees and Garrett Cole. First pitch, 7:08 Eastern time, as long as the weather holds. The weather's going to be fine out in L.A. The Dodgers, heavy favorites against the Giants in Mookie Betts' debut in Dodger blue.
And welcome to this hour of CBS Sports HQ. Amanda Guerra, Chris Hassel with you here in our Fort Lauderdale studios. Chris, it has been 10 days since Washington decided to retire its nickname, and today we know what they will be called, at least for the short period moving forward.
The Washington Football Team. That's it. That's the name. And that logo has since been retired as well. That was the new one. Just says Washington, and these are the mock-ups of the new uniforms. You notice the helmet. The logo removed, and it's just a number, and above the number on the jersey simply says Washington, but the colors remain the same, and the jersey, for the most part, remains the same, and there's been positive reaction from Washington players on social media about those new uniforms as well. Bringing in Ryan Wilson here, one of the co-hosts of the Pick Six podcast. Ryan, maybe 10 days late on this, but now officially that logo really doesn't need to be seen again.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. So it's a step in the right direction. The name obviously seems sort of boring, and I have this theory. You guys were talking about the Seattle Kraken. I do wonder if the Redskins are going to change their names to the Kraken. Seattle announced an announcement, and then 3 seconds later, in a rush, this should be the Washington Football Team for now. We'll figure it out. But the reality is they've moved on. It's taken 10 days. You wonder why it's taken that long. We talked to Jonathan Jones last segment. He mentioned some trademark issues. Interestingly, one of the men who held something like 30 trademarks said he was willing to give those trademarks over to the Washington Football Team. It hasn't happened yet. I will say this, as boring as the name is, we see teams in Europe all the time refer to themselves, soccer teams, as FC for football club, and they have huge fan bases and they do extremely well. So it's not the end of the world, especially in the short term. And also, and you touched on this as well, the colors are the same, and the helmet actually looks pretty cool. Penn State has the super sexy helmet, but that's a sort of an iconic uniform, and I feel like it could be the same thing, at least in the short term, for the Washington Football Team.
Now, in that ESPN report, they do state that the franchise is looking to fans, former players, sponsors, for suggestions on a new nickname. Is there any chance that it just stays the Washington Football Team so they can keep all the colors and keep pretty much everything the same?
That's a good question. And again, you wonder why it took 10 days just to release the fact that they're going to refer to themselves in the interim as the Washington Football Team. And they'll reach out and they'll get feedback and see what people think about it. I can't imagine that this will be the final name. I can't imagine that the Washington fans in that area will settle on the Washington Football Team. Go Football Team! I don't know if that has the of what it might for another mascot. Obviously, I will note this, by the way, Chris and JJ mentioned this as well. They changed their Twitter handle to Washington NFL. Oddly enough, they still have the logo on their Twitter feed, so maybe they'll change that. But we'll find out what happens. I say 1% chance that it remains Washington Football Team by the time this is all said and done.
Yeah, the only reason I think it might have a chance is just because those soccer names are just like that. I mean, we had yesterday the Charlotte Football Club is going to be one of the newest MLS franchises. And we know at this point, or at least I guess we can read into this, that they don't have a nickname picked out as of right now, even though, you still, it's going to be a long process. But I think some thought that maybe there were one or two names that they were zeroing in on that would be coming down the road. That doesn't appear to be the case, does it?
Not right now, no. And I mentioned the man that held all those trademarks on those names, who said he was willing to share those trademarks with the organization. This was a few weeks ago. He said he had not heard anything at the time. I don't know if that's changed, but if he's willing, and he had a ton of names trademarked that we've heard mentioned as possible new names for this team. Now the question becomes, when does this happen? Is it something you announce in the middle of the season to get fans fired up if they're not doing well, for example? Is this something you wait towards the end of the year, assuming we have football, fingers crossed? So there are a lot of hurdles to clear logistically, but I do think the good news, and I know a lot of fans were concerned about keeping the colors, so the burgundy and gold staying the same. And I think in the meantime, the way the uniform looks, it's pretty sharp. And to have players come out in support of that also is a huge step in the right direction to keeping everyone on the same page.
Guessing this is going to be the main topic on the next Pick Six podcast. Ryan Wilson, a part of that. You can hear him there anywhere you find your podcast. It's also available in video form on YouTube.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.